So in chapter 2.2, it's all about describing graphs and describing those functions. So the first way that we are going to look at describing the graph is looking at where's the graph and or function increasing, decreasing, and constant. So most people can identify where it's occurring, but they don't know how to write that. So when we're actually writing our answers, we actually only want to use the x values of our ordered pairs that we're talking about. So that's one thing to remember. We're going to answer only using the x values. Okay, so first we're going to label where I am increasing, decreasing, and constant, and then we will figure out how to write the actual answer. If I'm increasing, that means as I read the graph from left to right, the graph is going in the upwards direction. If I'm decreasing as I read the graph from left to right, then it's going in the downward direction. And if it's constant as I read the graph from left to right, it's going to remain the same, meaning that it will look horizontal. Okay, so let's look at this first example. So I notice, and don't look at the arrows, because as I read the graph from left to right, this arrow is not really going up. As I read this graph from the left to the right, I would be going in the downward direction. So it would actually be decreasing as I begin this graph. And then at this bottom point, I'm going to change directions, and I'm going to now be increasing as we go up on the graph. Then at this point, I'm going to change and I'm going to become constant. So most of the time, most people can see that these things are occurring. But what happens is they miss the answer because they're not writing the answer correctly. So in this decreasing part right here, really the way I want to write that is that I'm decreasing from the x value of negative infinity all the way until the x value of negative 2. Okay. Then I'm going to be increasing, so let's change here. I'm going to be increasing from the x values of negative 2 until the x value of 0. So from negative 2 to 0. Then I'm going to be remaining constant from the x value of 0 all the way to positive infinity. Now, when I go back and I look at these, if I take out the word x values, it almost looks like they're ordered pairs or it's some sort of a domain and range, and that's not what it is. That's why it's confusing to some people. But think about it as I'm looking at the graph from left to right, I'm describing where I'm changing the directions, and I'm only using the x value of that change. Okay, so notice I was using that negative 2 and that 0 because those were the 2 points where my change occurred, right? Let's look at one more example, make sure that we for sure got it. Okay. So I'm going to read this graph from left to right here. So as I'm looking at this graph, I'm going to be increasing, and we increased from negative infinity all the way up until negative 2. All right, then I started to decrease from that negative 2 all the way until 2. So I decreased from negative 2 all the way into 2. Then I changed again and I increased again from this 2 all the way to infinity. Right? Now, sometimes they'll put those together, and so they would say I'm increasing from negative infinity to negative 2 union, because I jump, I do something different, and then I start back again from 2 to infinity on my increase. Then I'm decreasing from negative 2 to 2. Okay, so I can write that either separately or sometimes it might be joined together. But that's how our increase, decrease, and constant works. I'm going to describe the direction in which the graph is taking, describing it using the x values only.